Welcome to the realm of Millenia. Be ye a man, a woman, a child, a spirit, a creature, or a demon. Be ye a native migrator, or maybe even an invader into the realm. Welcome, for I am your host, the Millenia Mailman, here today on this hot take hump day, week 23, Devil's Advocate with the hot takes. I welcome you, because it's not easy, but simple enough. Right, so this week's hot take is for the week 23, and as always, I'll be world building for you long after you've already begun to acclimate and fit in. So, yeah, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's Devil's Advocate hot take. So, this hot take specifically, word for word, is that there's no male loneliness epidemic, folks. There's no male loneliness epidemic. Only a widespread generational loneliness epidemic that has spread like dandelions because the worldwide COVID shutdown polarized all the communal groups further and directly against and away from each other. Right? Now, I actually don't have any notes on this. I just have the hot take. So I will surgically dissect this into what is known as the male loneliness epidemic, and juxtapose that to what would be considered a generational loneliness epidemic. Let me see what else. The COVID issue and the polarizing of the communal groups. So basically 4 plot points there that I'm going to break this up into and dissect, right? So first and foremost, for anyone who doesn't know what exactly the quote-unquote male loneliness epidemic is and what it's in relationship to, it is a phrase commonly referred to the incel, the growing incel community, at least what is considered the incel community, where incel is a shortened version of the term involuntarily celibate, where celibacy is abstinence, not having sexual relations with anyone, be it of opposite sex or same sex. You're involuntarily abstinent, you're involuntarily celibate, right? And with the rise of incels, where incels in some sectors is low-key, I don't want to say a slur, but it is a heavy insult. So with the rise of the incel community, there has been a analyzable trend of what is celibate, and there is both men and women that are identifying that as a specifically loneliness epidemic, because you can also very much identify that there are far less women who are not having sexual relations than there are men. And the fact that there is a very, very high stigma that men are far more sex hungry than women, that because that is the generic truth, that men are more fiends for sex than women, then the fact that less men are having sexual relations, that there must be some sort of form of male loneliness epidemic where men's aren't getting the love-ins that they should have or might possibly need, right? So the whole discussion around what exactly is the male loneliness epidemic is the fact that men aren't having sex as much as our historical data might prove that they once at some point on mass and large and percentage wise were potentially having sex, right? Less men are having sex, but women are still having equal to increasing margins of sexual interactions amongst each other and amongst others. So, this discussion piece for the hot take is saying that there's no real male loneliness epidemic. If anything, there's a generational loneliness epidemic, not in relation to any kind of gender and sexuality. The loneliness, there might be a loneliness epidemic, but there isn't like a sexual or genderfied loneliness epidemic that's happening around the world, let alone in America or in the Western nations, right? There's no real male loneliness, but there might possibly be a generational one, because the boomers are called boomers for a reason. We kept doing it, right? So there is a bit of confusion on that, right? There's no real male loneliness epidemic because it's not necessarily, I don't think the numbers are quite accurate in depicting the involuntary celibate. I think the numbers might be accurate. I think people do take those tests truthfully. Like, hey, some total of percentage of people are reporting that they aren't having sexual relations. Okay, cool. That number has increased. So I do believe that there might be a generational loneliness epidemic on the fact that I think more as the generations go by, there's more people, both male and females and non-binaries, or just non-labeled. There are more people in general who are openly identifying and being diagnosed as lonely, depressed, anxious, and a bunch of mental instabilities. I don't want to call them disabilities because I don't think a lot of those are rather severe enough to be garnishing the whole human life experience as disabled. I don't think, because even if you had an extended period of depression, I don't think that makes you and your human experience any more disabled than the person you lived life next to who was not as depressed as you were, right? I think that's rather discrediting. But yes, I don't care to label the whole aspect of loneliness as a disability. No, you're fine.
I was gonna ask you that. I know it's probably a stretch tomorrow. If I just have clients who can pick me up and you can take me for a lesson, that's probably a stretch to ask.
Yeah, you want a driving lesson? That's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
What time?
Oh, just after track practice, whenever.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Yes, I don't care to invalidate anyone's lived experience as a disability, right? I don't want to invalidate and label it as a loneliness, as a disability, because it's not. It's something you can work through and work over. For some people, it's harder than others, but that's a part of your lived human experience, right? I don't want it to be ever considered a disability for you or a disability for me. I don't want people to look at me as less than, like, oh, he's disabled. I don't want someone to look at me as awkwardly fascinated and mind-boggled. Oh, he's lonely and depressed, right? I don't want someone to see me and think, oh man, he's as disabled as an amputee. So I think that is a bad observation to call something mental like that a disability. That's why I personally consider a lot of these therapeutic diagnoses as instabilities, right? Because even the medication you take to fix it is a stabilizing medicine. All right. All right, back to it. So, quick recap and review. No male loneliness epidemic, more something akin to probably a generational loneliness epidemic going on, driven rust from the whole economic situation that every generation has to go through. There is rather all right. This will be the final time I'm moving. I don't think we could possibly get any away from distracting conversation noise in the background than outside. I'd rather hear crickets chirping than secondary conversations I might be enticed to listen to and snoop in on. All right. So, back to it. No male loneliness epidemic, generational loneliness epidemic. I'm not going to reiterate myself on those. And I'm just going to address the fact that the third and fourth plot points to this conversation is the big blame is being put on COVID. I could probably say that more eloquently, but seeing how I had to shift my location 4 or 5 times and now outside, I am a bit more abrasive about it. 30 minutes into trying to make this freaking video. Oh, right. There's much less of a male loneliness epidemic that involves sexuality than there is a generational loneliness epidemic that is seeped in mental instability for all the genders, from male to female to non-binary, or label identifying as something entirely different, like a furry or something like a Apache helicopter, whatever you're identifying as, to include male, female, non-binary, and beyond, whatever it is, right? There is a loneliness epidemic, not a gender, sex specific one, but a rather staggering hike in the general sense of mental instability brought about from loneliness. Because you can be lonely and still around people. You can feel isolated in a crowd. That is very much a proven fact. And the human what's that term? The human psyche was never made for long-term exposure. That's why it is considered cruel and unusual punishment to be in solitary confinement for extended periods of time without cause and reason. That's why it is always a psychological, therapeutic taboo to be put in isolation. Why it's always some form of negative reinforcement, or quite literally a direct punishment, because solitude is not okay for the creative, interactive human life experience, right? There is a really, really severe generational loneliness epidemic that is getting worse as generations go by, right? Be it sexual isolation, be it interpersonal disconnect and social awkward discomfort and self-administered isolation, because people are coming to the conclusion they'd probably be better off alone. It's like, I am voluntarily celibate, not involuntarily. I am making the choice to be abstinent from here on out. I am making the choice that I would much rather be peaceful and alone than stressed out than with people. That is an unfortunate more and more common take. It's not, I don't want to call it a hot take, but it's a more and more prevalent, agreed upon disposition nowadays than it ever has been. Right? It is surprisingly unfortunate. So I would say there's a growing rate of generational loneliness as the generations go by, and I would consider it an epidemic, because loneliness is not something we as human beings were ever made to be okay with, right? I can do it because I'm inhuman. I'm a devil. I'm a demon. I am the Millennium Mailman. I cross dimensional borders, so I am something entirely separate. You can never truly make me isolated. Even if I look alone in a room, that's just the husk. The mailman from within is very much socializing with those that you can't even see from the great beyond. I got friends from the other side, if you want to say, right? The demons are here with me, even presently. The astral projected realm that you can't see is here with me easily, right? But for you humans out there, for you non-millennian NPC natives, that's most unfortunate reality. Most humanoids, even in the realm of millennia, do have that despondent disposition to have negative, repercussive, long-lasting psychological repercussions for solitude. It is not a smiled upon thing to be in isolation. It creates a rather reciprocating negativity cycle of being alone, and thus growing more and more paranoid, and which is going to drive you to be alone more often, and self-reliant and self-serving and self-sacrificing, not to anyone else, but self-sacrificing yourself for the sake of yourself to ruin yourself without much any gain in positivity. That is the negative reciprocal cycle of being alone for human beings and humanoid creatures, even in the realm of millennia. It is not a good thing. So there is a rather generational loneliness epidemic, especially with the rise of technology that has, I would put the blame on that COVID shutdown period back in 2020 that really hiked up the amplitude, where the mass hysteria of paranoia and the government mandate that has had the long-lasting precursive, I'm just making up words now apparently, has had the long-lasting side effect of distrust and social distancing. Even though COVID is not that big a huge thing anymore, there's still the long-lasting side effect of more and more people are trying to be socially distanced, which put that a decade ago. Social distance, what do you mean? I think the socially distance proper is within 3 feet of each other when you're having a conversation with someone, let alone in the house. You might as well be hand in hand, arm in arm, talking sweet nothings in your ear with your brodies, or talking sweet nothings into this chick on the side over here. This right here would be considered social distancing. The space between these chairs, that's a proper social distance right there. Not too close that you end up butting elbows, but close enough where you can give a stern handshake, regardless of your gender and whatnot. But now social distance means I need to be, that person, that chair would be the closest someone should ever be to me out in public. That chair should be the closest contact. And that is fostering this polarized community of men to women, men and men, nerds to jocks. Where back in the day, nerds and jocks, we were rather close. Not close as in friendly, but we weren't lonely. We felt the love and lack thereof intimately back in the day. But nowadays, it's such a weird progression that probably isn't for the best, unfortunately. No matter how we can wish and hope and pray that it is for the best, it's probably not. You're deceiving yourself, most unfortunately, right? So not to say that COVID is the only thing, because there could be the conversations to be had of, kind of as I said, with the artificial intelligence growth, taking jobs and filling in the gaps of what people expected human interactions to kind of be like. The robots are taking over, kind of, and it's fostering these, no, I got a robot for that. No, I can get a computer for that. Oh, I got this machine. What happened to the human interaction, right? So with the growth of technology, of all things, and because of the unfortunate truth of the long-lasting side effects of the shutdown, which was like a very direct and like massive turning point, that is most unfortunately, excuse me, a rather big thing. And I'd probably say like the very I'd say it's the most predominant feature that you could call out to blame for this polarization. Because I'm sure there might be other ones, like some people might say dating apps was their true turning point the moment they got popularized. Everything has its negatives and pros. I don't want to blame the dating apps. Capitalism at its finest, leave it alone, right? But I would definitely put a more acute finger toward blaming the COVID shutdown for how polarized everyone got because of the shutdown and after it, the lasting effects of the COVID shutdown. Because on certain degrees, sure, the COVID shutdown was probably very pivotal and very necessary, but at the same time, was it worth it? Was it really worth it? Right? Because one of the lasting side effects is how the different communal groups and communities at large, the male community to female communities, these men versus women debates, oh gosh forbid, these religious groups that are even less inclined to interact and socialize and get along and agree with each other. You got these, what other groups are there? Hobby groups are far less interactive. I feel like there's a turning point for the hobbies and activity groups nowadays, but not really. It's just a matter of people joining new hobbies. It's not really much a matter of the hobbies and interest groups actually partaking in one another and agreeing or coming together. It's just people, the individuals, choosing to change hobbies, unfortunately. And that just, everything post-shutdown pretty much polarized everyone to further and directly just be set against each other and less likely to come together, which is most unfortunate. But hey, that's just the hot take, that there's probably not much of a male loneliness epidemic as much of a generational loneliness epidemic. I sure do hope I hit all those points and articulated them well, but seeing how I got booted out of all my spots, I got frustrated, I'm gonna be honest. And as always, this is a one-take video. I'm not editing it any further more than it already is or anything, so that's just too darn bad. Most unfortunate. But if you seem to like the video despite the setbacks, do give the video a like, put down in the comments section any thoughts, opinions, so on and so forth. Share the video for more exposure, or Subscribe if you feel like it. And dislike the video if you don't. I appreciate the feedback. I'm not one of the ones like, oh, you disliked my video. But hey, that's just me. I'll be posting out more and more videos every single day until my book is published. Count on that. Hold me to it. Right? But hey, as always, peace. Bye-bye.